He walked in wearing his son's shoes. I noticed them immediately, worn at the heels, 2 sizes too small. The way he moved, careful, like each step caused pain, told me everything before he said a word. The ticket was for parking in a handicapped zone. Seemed simple enough. Black and white. The law is clear. But something about the way he stood there, shoulders tight, eyes fixed on the floor, made me pause. There was a story here. There always is. "Mr. Patterson," I said, "do you understand why you're here today?" He nodded, barely. "I need you to speak up, sir." "Yes, Your Honor." His voice cracked, just slightly. Most people wouldn't catch it, but I've been doing this long enough to hear what people don't say. The prosecutor read the violation. October 14th, 3:47 p.m., downtown Providence, handicapped parking space, no placard, no visible disability. The fine, $350. I looked at the photographs. His car, a 1998 Honda Civic, faded blue paint, temporary registration taped to the inside of the rear window, sat clearly in the marked space. The blue wheelchair symbol was right there, no disputing it. "Mr. Patterson, did you park in this space?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And do you have a handicap placard?" He hesitated. "No, Your Honor, I don't." The courtroom was quiet. This should have been straightforward, but something wasn't adding up. I could feel it. "Then help me understand. Why did you park there?" His jaw tightened. He looked up for the first time, and I saw it, the thing he was holding back. Fear. Not of me. Not of the fine. Something else. I had to get inside quickly, Your Honor." "Quickly for what?" Silence. I waited. Longer than he expected. The clock on the wall ticked. Once, twice, 7 times. People in the gallery shifted. The prosecutor glanced at her notes. The court officer's radio crackled softly. But Mr. Patterson just stood there, fighting something inside himself. "Mr. Patterson, I'm asking you a direct question." His hands were gripping the podium now, knuckles white. "My daughter," he said finally. "She was in the hospital, the emergency room. They called me at work." The air in the courtroom changed. I leaned forward. "Go on." He took a breath, the kind that people take when they're about to let something go that they've been carrying for too long. "She's 8 years old, Chloe. She collapsed at school during recess. 1 minute she was playing, the next minute she was on the ground. They didn't know why. They called 911, then they called me. The principal, she was crying on the phone. She kept saying, 'You need to come now.' I've never heard an adult sound that scared." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I was at the landscaping job, 20 minutes away, maybe more with traffic. I threw my tools in the truck. Didn't even tell my boss. I drove. I drove as fast as I could without losing control. Every red light felt like an hour. Every car in front of me was blocking me from my daughter." The courtroom was completely still now. "When I got to the hospital, I didn't see the handicap sign. Or maybe I saw it and my brain didn't process it. I don't know. I just saw the emergency entrance and I parked in the first spot that would get me through those doors fastest. I ran. I actually ran. And these shoes," he looked down, "they're not great for running." "And what happened when you got inside?" I asked quietly. His eyes went wet. Not crying, just the edge of it. "They had her in a room. There were 3 doctors around her, machines beeping. She was awake, but she looked so small, so pale. She saw me and she said, 'Daddy,' and just that one word broke my heart into pieces." A woman in the gallery wiped her eyes. I saw it from the corner of my vision. "They did tests, so many tests, EKG, echocardiogram, blood work. They used words I didn't understand. Arrhythmia, cardiomyopathy, congenital defect. I just kept asking, 'Is she going to be okay?' And nobody would give me a straight answer." "But they figured it out?" I pressed gently. "Eventually. She has a heart condition. Long QT syndrome, they called it. It means her heart's electrical system doesn't work right. It can cause sudden cardiac arrest. The doctor told me, and I'll never forget this, he told me that if I had been 10 minutes later, if nobody had been there when she collapsed, she might not have made it." His voice broke on the last word. The prosecutor shifted in her seat. I could see it on her face. She hadn't known any of this. The citation report didn't include it. How could it? The parking enforcement officer just saw a car in the wrong spot. That's all the system sees. Is she okay now? I asked. He nodded slowly. She had surgery 2 weeks ago. They put in an ICD, an implantable cardioverter defibrillator. It's like a tiny computer that monitors her heart and can shock it back into rhythm if something goes wrong. She has a scar now, right here. He touched his chest. She calls it her superhero mark. Despite everything, I almost smiled at that. But the bills? He exhaled. The insurance covered some of it. But there are so many things they don't cover. The co-pays, the medications, the follow-up visits. We're still getting bills in the mail. Every day it feels like. I work 2 jobs now to try to keep up. During the day I do landscaping. At night I'm a janitor. I sleep maybe 4 hours if I'm lucky. Where do you work at night? The hospital, actually. Rhode Island Hospital, where Chloe was, where I parked that day. I clean the floors, the emergency room, the surgical wing, the cafeteria, anywhere they need me. The irony hung in the air. The man got a ticket for parking at the hospital where his daughter almost died, the same hospital where he now works to pay the medical bills that saved her life. And your son, you mentioned these are his shoes. Mr. Patterson looked down again, almost ashamed. Yes, Your Honor, Marcus. He's 13. He had a growth spurt this summer, shot up 3 inches. His feet, too. These sneakers didn't fit him anymore, so I started wearing them. My work boots got soaked through last week when I was planting shrubs in the rain. They're still drying out in the basement. I keep meaning to buy new ones, but... He trailed off. But the money goes to other things, I finished for him. Yes, Your Honor. Where is Marcus now? At home, with Chloe. He watches her after school while I'm working. Makes sure she takes her medication. Does her homework with her. He's a good kid. Growing up faster than he should have to. I sat back in my chair. Let the silence build again. Everyone was waiting. The prosecutor, the clerk, the officer, the people in the gallery who had their own cases but were now completely absorbed in this one. Mr. Patterson, let me ask you something. When you parked that day, was there anyone else who needed that space? Anyone who couldn't access the hospital because you were there? He thought about it carefully, like he'd thought about it 1,000 times already. No, Your Honor. I've replayed that moment in my head every day since. The lot was mostly empty. It was mid-afternoon, middle of the week. I remember seeing other handicapped spaces open, at least 2 or 3, maybe more. Nobody was circling looking for a spot. The emergency entrance area was quiet. I nodded slowly. Did you leave your car there long? Maybe 90 minutes. Once I knew Chloe was stable, once they told me they were keeping her for observation, I went out to move it. The ticket was already on the windshield. I didn't contest it. I didn't call to complain. I just accepted it. Because I did park there, I broke the rule. And you came here today prepared to pay. Yes, Your Honor. I brought money orders. It took me 3 weeks to save up the $350, $20 here, $40 there. I picked up extra landscaping jobs on weekends. I skipped lunches, but I got it, because I'm responsible for what I did. The money orders, he actually brought money orders. Not a check, not a credit card. Money orders that he had to buy with cash, because that's what people do when they're living close to the edge. When every dollar is counted and allocated before it's even earned. I looked at the citation again, at the photographs, at the formal legal language that reduced this man's desperate sprint to save his daughter down to a violation code and a fine amount. The law is clear. The space was marked. He parked illegally. But somewhere in my 30 years of practicing law and 23 years on this bench, I learned something that law school never taught me. The law is a framework, not a cage. Mr. Patterson, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Yes, Your Honor. In all my years doing this, and there have been a lot of them, do you know what I've learned about justice? He shook his head slightly. I've learned that justice and punishment are not the same thing. They're related, yes. Sometimes they overlap, but they're not identical, and the difference between them is what separates a good legal system from a cruel one. The prosecutor was watching me now. She knew where this was going. I could see it in her eyes. You broke the law, Mr. Patterson. That's a fact. The photograph proves it. Your own testimony confirms it. There's no question about what happened. He nodded, resigned to whatever came next. But let me tell you what else I see. I see a man who works 2 jobs. A man who wears shoes that hurt his feet because he can't afford new ones. A man who saved up for 3 weeks skipping meals to pay a fine that represents a significant portion of his monthly income. A man who didn't make excuses, didn't blame anyone, didn't try to weasel out of responsibility. You stood here today and told the truth, even though the truth revealed just how hard your life has become. His hands were shaking now, just slightly. And I see something else. I see a father who ran to his daughter when she needed him most, who drove through traffic with his heart in his throat, who sprinted through a hospital entrance in shoes that don't fit because every second mattered. And because of that, because you got there when you did, your daughter is alive. A tear rolled down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. So here's the question I'm wrestling with, Mr. Patterson. What does justice require in this moment? Does it require that I take $350 from a man who can barely afford to eat? Does it require that I punish a father for saving his child's life? Does it require that I follow the letter of the law so strictly that I ignore everything else about this situation? I paused, let the question hang in the air. Or does justice require something different? Does it require that I see the human being standing in front of me, that I recognize the impossible choice you faced, that I acknowledge that you've already been punished by fear, by medical bills, by a system that makes people choose between their families and their financial survival? The courtroom was silent, absolutely silent. Here's what troubles me most about this case. It's not you, Mr. Patterson. You did nothing wrong. Not really. You made a split-second decision under the worst circumstances imaginable. You parked in a spot that wasn't yours because your child was dying. My voice got harder. What troubles me is the system that gave you this ticket. The system that saw your car and saw a violation but didn't see you. Didn't see your panic. Didn't see your desperation. Didn't see your humanity. It just saw revenue. A chance to collect $350 from someone who can't afford to fight back. The prosecutor looked down at her files. She wasn't happy, but she understood. And what troubles me even more is that this system doesn't care what happens after. It doesn't care that you're working yourself into exhaustion. It doesn't care that your son is raising your daughter because you're never home. It doesn't care that you're wearing shoes that don't fit because you spent your last dollars on medicine and food. The system doesn't care. It just processes citations and collects money and moves on to the next case. I leaned forward. But I care, and I'm not going to be part of a system that grinds down good people and calls it justice. Mr. Patterson's eyes widened. Your Honor, I'm dismissing this citation. You're not paying the fine. Not today. Not ever. He stared at me, disbelief written across his face. But I parked illegally. The law is important, Mr. Patterson. I believe in the law. I've devoted my entire life to it. But the law is supposed to serve justice, not replace it. And there is no justice in punishing you for saving your daughter's life. Tears were streaming down his face now, silent, uncontrollable. Your Honor, I don't know what to say. I came here expecting to pay. I brought the money. I was ready to... I know you were. That's exactly why I'm doing this. Because you were ready to pay. Because you took responsibility. Because you showed up here with dignity and honesty, even though it was hard. That matters to me. I picked up the citation and held it up. Do you see this? This piece of paper says you owe the city $350. But I say you don't owe anyone anything. You've paid enough. More than enough. I tore the citation in half. The sound echoed in the quiet courtroom. Your Honor? His voice was barely a whisper. Mr. Patterson, I want you to take that $350 you saved up, every hard-earned penny of it, and I want you to do something for me. Anything at all. First, buy yourself a pair of shoes that fit. Good work boots. The kind that will last. Don't argue with me about it. You need them. He nodded, overwhelmed. Then take whatever's left, and there should be a good amount left, and you spend it on your family. Take Chloe out for ice cream. Buy Marcus that video game he's been wanting. Take your wife. You're married, I assume. Yes, Your Honor. Sarah. She works as a home health aide. Take Sarah out to dinner, somewhere nice, somewhere she doesn't have to cook or clean up. Just sit together and breathe for a few hours. Can you do that?" He couldn't speak. He just nodded, tears still falling. "Good, because here's what I need you to understand. This isn't charity. This isn't me feeling sorry for you, though I do. This is justice, real justice, the kind that sees people, not just violations, the kind that understands that sometimes the right thing to do is to show mercy instead of punishment." I sat back in my chair. "You represent something important, Mr. Patterson. You represent the thousands of people who come through these doors every year. Good people, hard-working people, people who made one mistake on the worst day of their lives, and the system doesn't care. It takes their money, their time, their dignity, and it calls that justice, but it's not justice, it's just bureaucracy wearing justice's clothes." The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, if I may address the court—" "You may not, Counselor. This case is dismissed. The citation is void. Mr. Patterson owes nothing. Are we clear?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." "Good. Mr. Patterson, you're free to go." He stood there for a moment, like he couldn't quite process what had just happened, like he was waiting for me to change my mind, to say it was all a mistake. "You can leave now," I said gently. "Go home to your family." "Your Honor, thank you. Thank you so much. I don't have words. I'll never forget this. Never. You changed everything. Thank you. Just take care of Chloe and yourself and that family of yours. That's all the thanks I need." He gathered his papers with shaking hands, started toward the door, those ill-fitting shoes making that same careful, pained shuffle. "Mr. Patterson," he stopped, turned back. "One more thing." "Yes, Your Honor?" "When Chloe asks you about today, and she will, children always do, I want you to tell her something for me. Of course, anything. Tell her that the world isn't always fair. Tell her that sometimes bad things happen to good people, and there's no reason for it. But also tell her that sometimes, not often, but sometimes, the people in the world try to balance things out, try to add a little more kindness than cruelty, a little more mercy than judgment." He was listening, really listening. "And tell her that her father is a good man, not because of what happened today, but because of how he's lived every day, because he works 2 jobs, because he runs when his family needs him, because he takes responsibility even when things are hard. Tell her that's the kind of person she should try to be." His hand went to his heart. "I will, Your Honor. I promise I will. One last thing. Tell her that scar on her chest, that superhero mark. Tell her it's a reminder that she's stronger than she knows, and that she's loved more than she can imagine, by her father, her mother, her brother, and by a judge who met her father for 10 minutes and could see immediately what kind of family raised her." He couldn't speak anymore. He just nodded, tears flowing freely, and walked out. The door closed behind him. The courtroom remained silent for a long moment. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. We all just sat there, processing what had happened. The next case was called. A traffic violation, speeding ticket. The defendant approached the bench, but something had shifted in the room. I could feel it. The way people looked at each other, the way the officer's expression had softened, the way even the prosecutor seemed more thoughtful, because that's what these moments do. They remind us why we're here, not to collect money, not to process cases, but to serve justice, real justice, the kind that sees people. Later that afternoon, during a break, my clerk brought me something. "Judge, someone left this at the front desk. It's addressed to you." It was a note, handwritten on lined paper torn from a spiral notebook. The handwriting was rough, hurried, emotional. "Your Honor, I'm sitting in my car in the parking lot. I can't drive yet because I can't see through the tears. My daughter asked me this morning what would happen in court. I told her I would have to pay money. She asked if that meant we couldn't get pizza this weekend like I promised. I told her we'd figure it out. Now I can get her that pizza, and those work boots, and maybe even that dinner with my wife. But more than that, you gave me something I didn't know I needed. You saw me, not as a case number, not as a violation, but as a person, as a father, as someone trying his best in a world that keeps getting harder. My daughter asked me on the way to court if angels are real. I didn't know what to say, but now I do. I'll tell her yes, because I met one today. Thank you for your mercy. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve it. James Patterson. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer, because on the days when the cases blur together, when the docket is endless, when I wonder if any of this makes a difference, I need to remember this moment. The clerk was still standing there. That was a good thing you did, Judge. Maybe. Or maybe it was just the right thing. I'm not always sure there's a difference. She smiled. Either way, that man won't forget it. Neither will I. And I meant it. Because here's what people don't understand about this job. They think it's about knowing the law, about precedents and statutes and legal arguments, and sure, that's part of it. But the real job, the important job, is about wisdom, about knowing when to apply the law strictly and when to apply it mercifully, about understanding that behind every case is a human story, and sometimes that story changes everything. I've dismissed cases before. I'll dismiss cases again. But this one will stay with me. Not because it was dramatic or unusual, but because it was so ordinary. Because there are thousands of Mr. Pattersons out there right now, working 2 jobs, wearing shoes that don't fit, trying desperately to keep their families afloat while the system extracts every last dollar it can, and most of them never get mercy. They just get processed. But today, in my courtroom, one of them did. And maybe that doesn't change the whole system. Maybe it doesn't fix anything permanently. But it changed something for Mr. Patterson. And for Chloe, and for Marcus, and Sarah, and everyone who loves them. Sometimes that's enough. 3 months later, another envelope arrived. Inside was a photograph and a letter. The photo showed a little girl with a bright smile and a pink scar peeking out from her t-shirt. She was holding a book, The Little Prince, the letter said, and standing next to her was Mr. Patterson. He was wearing new work boots, not expensive ones, but clean, sturdy, boots that fit, and behind them, slightly out of focus but clearly visible, was a teenager, Marcus, with his arm around his sister's shoulder, protective, proud. The letter was short. Your Honor, Chloe is doing wonderfully. The doctors say her heart is strong. She goes back to school full-time next week. She can't wait to see her friends. Marcus saved up his allowance and bought her that book. He reads it to her every night. Last night she told him that the fox's secret, what is essential is invisible to the eye, reminds her of you, because you saw what was essential about her dad, even though it wasn't visible. I wanted you to see her smile, the real one, the one that came back after the surgery, after the fear, after everything, and I wanted you to see these boots. I wore them to work last night and my feet didn't hurt for the first time in months. Such a small thing, but it matters. We had that dinner, Sarah and me. We went to a little Italian place downtown. We held hands across the table and remembered what it felt like to just be together without worrying about bills or medicine or what happens next. It was perfect. You asked me to thank you by taking care of my family. I'm doing that every day. But I also needed you to know what your mercy meant. It meant hope. It meant dignity. It meant being seen. Thank you for your mercy and for teaching Chloe that kindness is real. James Patterson. I put the photograph on my desk, right next to the first note, and every time I look at it, every time I see that little girl's smile, I remember why this job matters. Not because of the law is important, but it's just words on paper. What matters is what we do with those words, how we apply them, whether we use them to help people or hurt them, whether we see the human being behind the violation or just the violation itself. Justice isn't blind. It shouldn't be. Justice should see everything, the circumstances, the context, the struggle, the humanity, and then it should decide not just what the law permits, but what wisdom requires, what mercy demands, what compassion makes possible. That's what I tried to do that day with Mr. Patterson, and every single day since I've tried to do the same, because we all face choices in this life, choices about how we treat people, about whether we show mercy or exact punishment, about whether we see others as people or as problems to be solved, and the choices we make, especially when we have power, define who we are. Mr. Patterson walked into my courtroom wearing his son's shoes, expecting nothing but punishment, carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, ready to pay a price that would hurt. He walked out with his dignity intact, with mercy he didn't ask for but desperately needed, with $350 that would buy boots and pizza and a dinner with his wife, small things that mean everything when you have nothing. But more than that, he walked out knowing something important, that he was seen, that his story mattered, that his love for his daughter was recognized and honored. And in that moment, in that simple act of human decency, something shifted, not just for him, but for everyone who witnessed it, everyone who heard about it, everyone who needed to believe that the system could still have a heart. Because that's the thing about mercy. It ripples outward. It changes not just the person who receives it, but everyone who sees it happen. It reminds us all that we're capable of being better than we think we are. That's why I'll never forget the case that silenced the courtroom. Not because of the dramatic speeches or the emotional testimony, but because of what was seen beneath it all: a father's love, a family's struggle, a moment of grace, and the reminder that the most important law we serve isn't written in any book or carved on any courthouse wall. It's written in our hearts. The law that says, see people, really see them, and when you have the power to show mercy, use it, because that's what justice really is. Not punishment for its own sake, not strict enforcement of every rule regardless of context, but wisdom, compassion, the willingness to look at a situation and ask, what does this moment actually require? Sometimes it requires firmness, sometimes it requires consequences. The law must mean something, or it means nothing, but sometimes, in moments like these, it requires mercy. And I thank God I had the wisdom that day to know the difference. Mr. Patterson's shoes told me everything I needed to know, not the shoes themselves, but what they represented: sacrifice, dignity in the face of hardship, a father putting his family first, even when it meant wearing shoes that hurt. And if I couldn't see that, if I couldn't honor that, then what was I doing on this bench? So I made a choice, the same choice I hope I'd make again if faced with it tomorrow. To see the person, not the violation, to choose mercy over punishment, to remember that justice is supposed to heal, not just hurt, and to never forget that behind every case, every citation, every defendant standing nervously at that podium, there's a story, a human story. And sometimes, if we're brave enough to listen, that story changes everything.